some of you may have seen at the Good Luck Gallery on Main Street that there is some bird art in the town. And he's here to present the birds that he photographed and a little bit about the banding in Glacier National Park. So it is my honor to introduce Daniel Lombardi.
My name is Daniel. I do work in Glacier, but I'm really presenting and talking tonight more as just a citizen and a birder and I guess a photographer or an artist. I grew up in the Clark Fork Valley in Deer Lodge. I did a lot of farming growing up, but I remember seeing osprey nests with baling twine and all of that in them. So I've got well, let me start by saying, yeah, so like Jess said, I have a show, an art show, a photography show at Good Luck Gallery in downtown Kalispell right now. Just opened on Friday. It's going to be open until mid-April. So I hope you'll go check it out. And then right now I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about the kind of photography that I'm showing, which is called cyanotype photography. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about bird banding, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about long-term thinking and some of the ideas that I want to express or share with this art show. I'll say, maybe to explain the whole show and my original thinking with it, was that when I was banding birds, I started to feel like it was really special, like from the beginning. And I was taking photos and looking at the photos of people right as they were about to release the birds. It started to feel like a very spiritual thing to like hold this bird and then let it go. Maybe because people's hands were kind of clasped, it also looked like a kind of prayer gesture. And I think for a lot of the scientists and conservationists who do band birds, it is a kind of spiritual practice. So the idea with the show then was to really lean into that and imagine, what if birds were to go extinct? I know 50, 60 years ago, there were something like 30% fewer birds singing every morning than there are now. So there were 30% more birds in 1970 than there are now. So there's 30% fewer today. So imagining a future without birds, it's kind of morbid or depressing, but it's where my mind went when looking at these photos and thinking like, what if someone were to find these photos 100 or 1,000 years from now? What might they think about our relationship with birds? So that was the idea of my show. It's called Recalling Birds. We can jump into it. So it's cyanotype photography. It's one of the earliest kinds of photography. It was developed in the early 1800s, and it's always had a connection to science. It was used for documenting and preserving plant specimens. Basically, you can lay a flower or something on cyanotype paper and then expose it to the sun, ultraviolet radiation, and it'll leave an accurate imprint or a photo of that plant. Cyanotype photography has, since the beginning, been used for scientific purposes. When I started going out bird banding, I was taking photos just with a digital camera to document molt patterns and age of the birds and document the process, things like that. But then I started printing them with cyanotype. So I have some videos to see. So cyanotype is a chemical. You mix a couple chemicals together, and you paint it onto whatever surface you want to print on. In my case, mostly paper, cotton paper. And then you put something in between the paper and ultraviolet light. So historically, that would have been like a plant specimen. You lay it on the paper and then you expose it to the sun. In my case, This is a negative. It's a plastic printed out black and white photo of a grosbeak. And then I take a ultraviolet lamp and shine it on there. You can play it again too. So then, and I do that for a couple minutes and then pull the negative off. And you're left with an image on the piece of paper.
I'll play it one more time for you folks.
So the photo is taken with a fairly regular digital camera and then printed with a fairly regular printer onto a piece of plastic. Okay, then the next slide is a quick video as well of the next step in the process. The next step in the process is to take the paper or the fabric or whatever you printed on, and you got to rinse it off. And all that yellow, green will wash away, and you'll be left with blue and white. So the water in this case is that bright blue color just because it's been rinsing prints a bunch of times. And so the blue gets left over in there, but it really is basically just water. I add vinegar so that it's a little bit more acidic. And that's the cyanotype process. It's pretty simple.
Do we want to watch it one more time?
Well, it's only 20 seconds.
Let's watch it again. Big screen,
excited.
baby.
This is a tree swallow that we caught last summer. So I painted the circle of the cyanotype chemicals, and then I laid the negative over it, shined it with a UV light, like a party black light, basically, for about 2 minutes, and then that's the result. It's off. When I started, I was using just like a grow lamp, like for your seedlings, and it would take 45 minutes per exposure. So then I realized that you need to get a better lamp. So to illustrate that, there was about a year and a half of experimentation to learn this process, which included lots of little prints like this. Weekends, mornings, here and there, printing out negatives, and then doing little tests. Some of them you can see don't have a lot of detail. The eyes disappeared some of them are kind of faded, some of them look good. So it was a lot of practice of just trying things out. Cyanotype has a lot of mystery and magic in it. I printed, then as I got a little further along, my experiments became a little bit more rigorous, and I would print the exact same photo, 100 times with slightly different recipes for the chemicals, for the rinsing, and then sometimes toning the image in basically just soaking it in tea or coffee to give it a slightly different color. So this is I believe an American Red Star because it's about to be released many times. So here's the digital photo of a spotted sandpiper nest. I live by the river, so I just sit and listen and watch what the sandpipers are up to in the evenings. And one of them led me to their nest once, and I took this photo just with my digital camera. Then I made the negative, and that's what it looked like as a cyanotype. So it's a different kind of image. There's a purpose for color images. You can get some things, but I really liked the look and kind of the historic feel of the cyanotype. It's not black and white, it's blue and white. Some images like this, so you have a catbird. You can age them by looking at the color of their eye. I remember, right, they get darker as they get older. And so it was useful for scientific purposes to have photos like this to train people and to compare different catbirds, and so you can verify how old they are. But for artistic purposes, I really like the cyanotype process to simplify. This is a red-eyed vireo. probably my favorite bird. And I wouldn't have thought that I would like to see a photo without red eye, but I really do like the red-eyed vireo in blue and white. So this is how I did a lot of the images for the show, is I painted on a circle and then printed the negative into the circle. There's I think the same red-eyed vireo, just a different presentation. You can see its band in between the fingers there. And then I placed lichen, wolf lichen, or little bits of grass around the edge of the print when I shine the light on it. And it gives you just a little bit of a pattern and texture around the edge of the image. This was a very exciting bird because, so we caught this bird in 2024, I believe, three-toed woodpecker. We caught this one in Glacier National Park at their bird banding station. I photographed it and then made a cyanotype of it, and I'm pleased with that. But then just the other day at the opening of the show, someone showed me a photo that they took near the bird banding station of an American three-toed woodpecker with the band on it. And we've only ever caught one in Glacier, so it has to be the same one. It's right in the same place. You don't get to see that very often in banding birds. It's special to catch a bird more than once. But this one we know is still out there, so that's pretty cool. We caught it in 2024, and then this was just a few weeks ago or last week that someone saw it. So if I'll have time for questions at the end, and talk more about the cyanotype process. And maybe most people here are familiar with bird banding a little bit, but we can go into it some more. I'll go over it with some cyanotype photos. This is a mist net used to catch birds. This is in Waterton National Park in Canada. This is putting the band onto a bird. I've been explaining it like when you go to the trailhead and there's a whole bunch of blue Subaru Outbacks. How could you know which one's yours? Well, you can check the license plate at the very least. Bird bands are kind of like putting license plates on birds so we can tell them apart. Well, when you have the bird in your hand, you can also age it very specifically by looking at the pattern of molt in the feathers. You can tell exactly how old it is, and then you're also able to check and see, is it breeding? Is it a young bird or an old bird? So this picture shows a feather molting a new feather in right there. And then once you have information about the age and demographics of the birds, you can use statistics to see, is the population increasing or decreasing? Are they doing okay? Are they declining or getting better? In Deer Lodge at Grand Corps National Historic Site, the University of Montana bands birds. And there we caught this spotted sandpiper. They're, you can sex them by measuring the spots on their bellies. It's not very easy, but that's what they're trying to do here. These are both images kind of the table of supplies used to band birds. That's that same three-toed woodpecker. Yeah, and then there's the banding pliers and the ruler to measure the wings, and then that gauge at the top tells you how big of a band to put on the bird's leg. Education has become a really important part of bird banding. It didn't necessarily start off that way, but most banding sites now have a component where they encourage the public to come see and learn from the process. And so that's what's happening here is University of Montana bander is showing red-winged blackbird to some visitors and explaining the purpose of this science. And this is the same thing, but with a cell phone photo. That's me working with one of the interns at Glacier National Park, and then my mentor Lisa Beatty on the right. This is looking at the brood patch on a yellow warbler. So there's the color version of it flipped around. You can see the brood patch is starting to dry up a little bit, which means this female yellow warbler is probably wrapping up her incubation. She's probably about done nesting for the year. And then another catbird. With one feather right there in the middle molting. Another more complicated way of aging birds is looking at their skull. Just like people, their skulls don't fully form until they reach a certain age. So if you can see through their skull a little bit, you can be sure that it's a young bird. So I started working on this project about a year ago. And I started thinking about what is the future of all this? If I look at these art pieces I was making and they look like historic artifacts or old historic papers that you'd find in a museum, then what would it, how can I put myself into the future 1,000 years of looking back? What will I make of this, our relationship with birds? What will I think of bird banding? But also, what do we think is going to happen to birds and to this science in the next 10, 20, 50 years? So this is a sketch I put together of just some ideas of what bird banding could be like in 2035. And I based this on about 10 different interviews I did over the past couple months with bird banding experts around North America. Talked to a lot of people in Canada, in the Yukon, and some people in Latin America as well. And I'll share with you a few of the things they talked to me about. But one of the things that was guiding me or that encouraged me to do these interviews was the idea that the future is what we make of it. I've been thinking a lot about the possibilities of AI in aging and identifying birds, and how do I feel about that? How comfortable do I feel with that? I think it's important that we create the future that we want. So I'll just share some more photos of my work, and also just some things that people shared with me. One bird bander told me that right now the limitation is not computing power. The limitation is not the technology. We don't need faster computers or lighter GPSs. We need to be better organized and use better the data that we have. Unfortunately, and several people told me this, there's a lot of data sitting on shelves. So I think maybe that's a reminder to us all if we're working on projects or been collecting data on something for years to make sure that it's accessible to the world. Other experts I talked to emphasized that the birds we have here in Montana spend most of their lives, typically, in Latin America. And so that a future of bird banding could be a future in which we use scientific names or Spanish names more often. And we think of the birds summering here, but we think of their whole life cycle that includes their time in Latin America a little bit more. D is just slide. This is just for show. Yeah, so someday you'll catch a bird, you'll call it by its Latin name. Maybe the band itself will be small enough it'll have a GPS in it. The technology will be so good you'll scan the wing with a camera and it'll tell you the species, the age, the sex, anything about the bird you might want to know. And then you'll talk to it in Spanish and let it go. This is a piece from my show. This is a red start being released. You do it sometimes.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot about AI, and I thought for a while, like, yeah, maybe bird banders should just decide that AI is not something we want involved in bird banding. Well, I found that actually there's already a lot of AI being used in bird banding, so it's a little too late. But I talked to bird bander, an expert in Latin America, and they talked about how these AI models are only as good as the data they're trained on, and that right now, not only does AI not know anything about bird molt for a lot of the birds in the tropics, but the guidebooks, the field guides, they don't know anything about it either. The experts will catch birds and they don't know they don't know very much about their molt patterns. And that's partly because they're understudied in many places in the world. Molt is understudied, but also because in the tropics, birds utilize a lot more different kinds of molt strategies because they are not so dependent on harsh seasonal cycles. So the molt patterns could be harder and more complicated to learn. This is a flycatcher. I don't know if anyone can tell if it's a willow or an alder flycatcher. The records that I have just say trails flycatcher. Couldn't tell the difference. I put some lichen and moss around the edge of it. Yeah, the tools that we have depend on the work that we put into them. So this goes to my hope that we'll work on creating the future we want to create, and that whether that uses AI or not, that we'll be thinking very consciously about how we want to conserve birds and the relationship we want to have with them. So red start. This pattern on the bottom is fern leaves that interact with I lay a piece of glass over the paper when I'm exposing the print, and the light bounces around in weird ways. One expert I talked to encouraged the idea that it exists to some extent already, that North American chapters of the Audubon Society fund partners in the tropics and in Latin America. So wherever the birds are, the birds in northwestern Montana, wherever they go in the winter, that chapters of the Audubon Society could fund banding and conservation of those sites specifically, kind of like helping out birds on their winter home. Townsend's warbler. The other thing that bird bander talked to me about was the importance of bird banding ethics. Of course, there's strict rules and protocols and permits required for handling and banding birds. You want to make sure that the science and the data you're collecting is worth the stress that you're giving to a bird. So as an exercise, this person told me that's a nice moment to reflect on your actions and think, am I doing this in the most ethical way? But that it's also an invitation to think beyond that and think about, am I approaching my life and my relationship with the natural world more broadly in an ethical way? And that when you hold a bird in your hands, that's a chance to do that, to think, like, I am in relationship with this thing. Even if I don't always have it in my hand, I am impacting this animal through my everyday life. Okay, so the last thing I want to touch on then is the purpose of this show was for me to encourage that kind of long-term thinking, encourage thinking about the future, and encourage imagination. I think that so many of the challenges we face in society today, especially climate change, are in many ways crises of the imagination. They're a failure for us to imagine what the world could be, both for the better and for the worse. So I want to encourage imagination. That's what the art show is trying to do. I hope you'll go to Good Luck Gallery and check it out. Because additionally, the other thing I wanted to achieve with this is I wanted it to have some tangible give back to conservation. So all the profits from the sale of these photos is going to be given to Flathead Audubon Society. We had the show open on Friday and sold a few pieces, and the gallery is dealing with that. So I don't know, but I know there's plenty left to buy. So I hope you'll go check it out and look at the art and engage with some of the pieces. Some of the pieces I have are writing and thinking prompts. I hope you'll go and look at that and look at the work and think about it and tell your friends to go buy pieces and support Flathead Audubon. And then I probably forgot some stuff, so I'll answer questions, but I have just a 60-second video that I'll play now, and then I'll take questions. Hopefully I covered most things. So this is a bird banding station in Glacier, and this is just sort of, if you haven't seen what a bird banding station is like, this is a quick preview of it. And there is sound, but it's not important. The sound is just the ambient bird songs, that annoying bird songs. We don't know. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was in college, in a textbook, occasionally seeing this cyano art photography. I didn't know what it was at the time, but can you tell us one more time? Because I didn't quite understand what you said about why they were done for scientific purposes sometimes.
The reason cyanotype photography was used for science in the 1800s was because it was kind of the cutting edge technology at the time.
Oh.
So if you wanted to, you could draw out a specimen of flower or a bird, like Audubon did. But if you want to document it in a quicker, more exact way, one of the best technologies you had was photography. And until it was, cyanotype photography was one of the first developed. So you'd lay down a plant specimen and you could replicate it exactly on a piece of paper.
Thank you. And also, what is the longevity of that form of art? Like, does it fade over time or does it stay that way forever?
There's interesting questions about what is forever, but it lasts a long time. It's as long as any like archival like ink printer that you might use to hang a photo up. They last for a really long time. It's permanent. If you put a little bleach on it, it'll wash off pretty easily. It's doesn't hold up well to alkaline solutions as it holds up to acidic solutions. Then I have my email and stuff on here. It's kind of hard to read, and also you can look at the show on the gallery's website.
Where is the gallery located?
127 Main, I think. So it's the Outfitter store right there.
Rocky Mountain Outfitter.
Yeah, I
It's
think it's like
next.
right next to that. I'm really glad no one's asking me like detailed questions about the molds. Yeah.
Quite understand I didn't get a negative out of the digital print.
You have to basically edit the digital photo a little bit in Photoshop. You drop the color out of it, invert the image, and then you just hit print onto a piece of plastic. So that's it. There is a lot of like experimentation with like how much contrast do you need or not need, and how bright should things be versus how dark they should be, and that takes a lot of experimenting to get it right. But it is at the base of it pretty simple. Just invert it, get print.
Point you were looking at your photos and decided that they seemed spiritual to you, the birds being how did you just end up thinking of cyanotype?
It was actually after I started doing the cyanotypes. I was just learning to do cyanotypes on its own for its own sake, because it seemed interesting. And as I was printing them, I was trying different images. I took pictures of the park's glaciers and printed those, pictures of a wildfire in the park and printed those. And they didn't work super well because they depended a lot on color. What makes a photo of a glacier really cool is that blue, I think. What makes a picture of a fire really cool is that red and orange. So it needed to be a photo that looked good without color and in high contrast. And so I just by chance started, trying some of my photos of birds, and I liked the way they looked. And that's when I saw like the hands together, and it kind of all came together from there. So it was really kind of a feedback loop of seeing the work and then inspiring the idea for the work.
Do you do any other type of art or anything? Or is this like your first intro to art and now you're in an art gallery and it's like, whoa.
Mostly the second one. I have always thought of myself as an artistic person, and tried to approach the world a little bit with creativity. But this is my first time like making something that hangs on the wall and that goes in a gallery. That's completely new to me. Never done anything like that.
So if we partner again next fall with the Owl Research Institute and the Flathead Lake Biological Station on their banding of the saw-whet owl, it'd be neat if you could go and take some photographs of the owls being banded and do some sound art with that.
I would love to. I need to learn. I feel like I need to know what I'm doing a little bit, and just to even hang out. And I don't know how to age owls very well.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah, much easier.
Than a songbird.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also I'll have to just practice staying up late because I'm good at getting up early. But
So it would require an element of night photography.
Yeah.
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 But the cool thing that would be interesting about that is that I know that those owls fluoresce their wings under UV light as well, which is sort of an interesting mirroring of how the cyanotype photography is exposed with UV light. And I've seen cool pictures of people shining black lights on owl wings and the way they glow. So I would love to see that. I would love to.
Let's invite them.
Probably. I mean, everyone likes the owls. Some of them are a lot feistier than others, and you want to just let them go right away. Others seem more happy to just sit and have their picture taken for a second.
Can you talk about some of the like specific technologies that the vendors who spoke to you imagined being able to use the paper that would be useful to them if they mentioned?
Yeah, I didn't talk too much about that. Every bander I interviewed, I asked, do you really think that we will still be banding birds in 20, 30, 40, 50 years? And they all said yes, which I was surprised by because technology is changing so fast. eDNA is telling us whether there's a bird in a stream or a duck on a lake or whatever. Radar technology is getting good. GPS is getting so small. Photo recognition and AI are getting so good. I thought for sure that they would think that eventually the technology would just mean we don't need to catch the birds. But they all felt like that would remain a very important part of bird science for years and years to come. So I guess what technology do they think will happen? I think it is very possible that you will use an app on your phone, just like you use Merlin to double check or confirm or give you a start on what bird is singing. You'll use the same kind of AI app on your phone to look at an open wing of a bird and tell you how old it is. But that might only work on the most common species. We'll see.
What do you do for the work? When you're working?
I do media work for the park. So yeah, I'm not representing them tonight at all, but for them, I do exhibits and photography and help manage the website, that kind of thing. So this is kind of naturally somewhat connected to that. But not all of this is from Glacier. I've also been banding with University of Montana and Parks Canada. So around the region.
Daniel, can you also just mention your podcast?
Oh, sure. Well, so for my job at Glacier, we make a podcast. It's called Headwaters. So you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. It's aired on MTPR, Montana Public Radio, before. It's a show about how Glacier National Park is connected to everything else. So the first season is kind of an overview of the park. So if you've been to the park a long time, I still think we have some new stories for you in there, but that first season is really kind of an introduction to the park. But then after that, we have a season all about Clark's nutcrackers and whitebark pine and their symbiotic relationship. That was featured on, I think, the American Birding podcasts.
I just listened to that.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
they re-aired it.
Mhm.
And then we have a season on the history of the park and so on. We're hoping to release a season all about huckleberries. Yeah, you can check it out wherever you get your podcasts. It doesn't have anything about bird banding yet, but it should.
Yeah. It's a good idea.
Then is the public invited to bird banding Glacier and also how does it connect?
I better not speak for Glacier, but I know that the University of Montana, they have a bird ecology lab. So they go by the acronym UMBL, and the public is invited to visit their banding stations. They have 3 of them around Missoula. And if you search like University of Montana birding banding, it'll come right up. And they generally, some of their sites, like at MPG Ranch, require some advanced reservations, but otherwise they're happy to have people show up, and they do a really good job of teaching people. And it's not that isn't possible at Glacier, it's just not my role. Thank you all for listening, and hope you'll check out the show. Yeah.